the next semester will also be online.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like I don't see any possibility that it's going to be online only. At least some part of it, at least half of the semester, unless things change drastically. I don't see possibility that they will call. Right now, their priority is to call PhD students. Some of the PhD students are on the campus, but unless situation improves drastically, I don't see that January they will be in a position to call students. So it's going to be like this. So you have to get prepared because when I talk to the instructors, they are heavily loaded. They are finding this online teaching very strenuous. Uh,
Yes.
I don't know what is the case with students, but certainly how you are finding.
This is the same kind of
Yeah. I think a better model would have been mm, that live lectures were telecast. Of course, they are recorded also. Those who cannot see live because of various network issues, then those video lectures are available. Then that brings in some amount of discipline, right? Then you are in the same mode, right? Every Monday you get up, 8 to 9, there is a math 515 class. Later on, something else is giving a class. So I think that would have been a better model rather than just throwing away lectures because, and most of them may be throwing away all the lectures on Monday itself, right? So we have a lot of lectures, and then as usual, the human tendency is you keep postponing your job to a limit, and only when it is very urgent you start working on it, and then by that time, possible it is late. So,
Sir, in IIT Bombay, the same thing is happening. Live lectures have been streamed and it gets somewhat easy.
so then it is because then you know that Monday you have to get up,
Yes, sir.
and then 8 to 9 you have to take this lecture, and I think that's a standard model followed everywhere. But IIT Kanpur, I think we imagine too many things. We imagine people will not have network connection, people will not have this much. So you cannot take care of everything because anyway, these are difficult times. So situation is not normal and everybody is going through it. So yeah, that's difficult. I can only say
And sir, I have also heard that MSc students have been called back in January in IIT Bombay.
they have been called, oh, right.
Yes, sir.
So you keep on, you pass on these feedback through your student representatives to DOA, SUGC chairperson, because they are the one who make the policy decisions. And the kind of difficulties you are facing, those also should be reported. Of course, I am getting some feedback from you people. I'll certainly pass it on to an appropriate level. But you also individually can think of giving this feedback.
Okay, sir.
So let us start. I think now 16 participants are there, so 15, excluding me, 15. So you want to discuss something about assignment number 4? I did not post assignment 5. I thought let us finish assignment number 4 today, and then I can post assignment number 5. Assignment number 5, anyway, I have just covered only one lecture. Yeah, so anybody? You don't have any doubts to ask? So yeah, anybody, please feel free to ask doubts from the assignment or otherwise as well. Yeah. Did you see the convocation today? Did you watch the convocation today, yesterday? Some of your seniors must have gotten a degree yesterday. Did you see? No, you didn't see.
Sir, I have seen the screenshots of the convocation.
Facebook, Facebook, you saw some screenshots, right? Yeah.
Sir, I have seen the live video.
Live video. How was it?
Uh, it was सर लग ही नहीं रहा था कि कॉन्वोकेशन है मतलब वैसा जो फीलिंग आना चाहिए कॉन्वोकेशन का वो चीज नहीं लग रहा था
I feel it should not have been that long. Because you see, just to see your small picture appearing somewhere in the corner, you wait 3 hours. Nobody has that much patience, right? One can always see a recorded one. So a better model, I feel, would have been you arrange for one good chief guest who can give a very motivational talk of 45 minutes or at the most of 45 minutes, 30 minutes to 45 minutes. And just roll those names over the screen and then open the screen for the parents and relatives of recipients of the degree. They can write their congratulatory notes and their experiences so that one doesn't have to be around. That's a special day they realize. They hear the convocation speech by the chief guest, and he should be a good speaker so that he can really make a difference on that special day. But anyway, yeah, so you don't want to ask anything. You're in seems like in a total festive mood, right? Because, huh? I don't see any reactions today. Because then I'll move to the next assignment next time if you don't ask. Let me just go through, browse through it if I can browse them for you. Let me. Can you see the assignment? Can you see?
Yes, sir.
So let us see. Go, let us say from backward. Problem number 16. Using heuristic or geometric arguments, you have to show that an admissible rule may not be a Bayes rule, right? So try to show that geometrically. Describe a situation where admissible rule normally would be in the lower boundary of that convex set, right? And so that this is not a Bayes rule, right? With respect to any proper prior, right? So you can this actually you can prove otherwise also. For example, in the normal case, can you give an example of an admissible rule which may not be Bayes? X bar, right? Saw that X bar in the normal case, if X1, X2, Xn is a random sample from normal theta 1, X bar is admissible because it was in certain sense not a Bayes, it was a limit of a Bayes, right? So this example could be straightforward from the normal case. If X1, X2, Xn is a normal random sample from normal theta 1, and you're interested in estimating theta under the square error loss function, then we have seen that X bar cannot be Bayes with respect to any proper prior. Why? Because X bar is unbiased estimator. And you know that under square error loss function, for any unbiased estimator to be Bayes, its Bayes risk should be 0. Right? Now, X bar has a Bayes risk 1 by n because its risk is 1 by n, which is constant. So Bayes risk is also 1 by n. So that means it cannot be based with respect to any proper prior. Because if it had to be based, its base risk had to be 0. But X bar we have shown it is admissible. Then you also saw that a Bayes rule may not be admissible, right? So you can show that convex region which we took as a square, right? The convex region which we took as a square, all the Bayes rules which may be there on the boundaries, right? But point on the boundaries may not be the base. Just see the geometric physical which we gave. Minimax rule may not be unique, that I explained last time, that is there in the lecture notes itself. Minimax rule may not be admissible. This is also there in the lecture notes. Bayes rule may not be minimax. This is there because minimax rule normally corresponds to the lower boundary point where R0 delta is same as R1 delta. So that means you draw X equal to Y line and exactly that. So that is minimax, that is a Bayes rule. That is a minimax rule, right? And Bayes rules may be other rules also which are there on the lower boundaries. Minimax rule here is unique. So all those Bayes rules other than the one which intersects with the line X equal to Y are Bayes, but they are not minimax. Minimax may not be Bayes. This also we covered in the lecture notes. So this all you can see, a lot of these you can see heuristically. First part follows from the normal example itself. So just see that if there are doubts, we can still consider that. Then let X be a normal theta1. I consider prior to be e to power theta. Note that prior density is e to power theta. E to power theta integrates out to infinity, right? Because d pi theta is e theta d theta, that means my prior density is e to power theta. And theta belongs to R. You see, e to power theta for theta less than 0 is a proper prior. But once I say that theta belongs to R, then e to power theta integrates out to infinity and it is not a proper prior. So that means in this case, we can talk about generalized Bayes estimator. So what I do is under square error loss function, you can see that generalized Bayes estimator is X plus 1. Right? Just see the minimizing the posterior risk, or the posterior mean in this case would turn out to be X plus 1. And in the normal theta1 case, what is a unique minimax rule? There is a unique minimax rule, which is X itself, right? That we did. Because square, that is a unique, sorry. So in this case, the minimax rule is X. We saw that, right? We saw that minimax rule is X. And what is its minimax risk? Risk is 1 because R theta X is 1. So supremum risk is 1 of X. What is the supremum risk of X plus 1? I look at risk of X plus 1. Risk of X plus 1 is same as variance. So variance of X plus 1 is 1 plus Bayes square. What is a Bayes square? Theta plus 1 minus theta whole square. So X plus, so 1 again, 1 square. So 1 plus 1, 2. So this has a risk 2. So its supremum risk is 2. So its supremum risk is greater than supremum risk of X. So this cannot be minimax. And this is not admissible. Why? Because its risk is 2. Its risk is nothing but expected value of X plus 1 minus theta whole square, which is same as mean square error, same as variance. So variance of X plus 1, which is 1 plus Bayes square. What is the Bayes? Theta plus 1 minus 1 whole square. So theta square. So its risk is 1 plus theta square, which is always greater than or equal to 1. And 1 is the risk of X. So risk of this is always bigger than risk of X. So this cannot be admissible. So this is an example which says that a generalized Bayes estimator may not be admissible. It may not even be minimax. Is that okay? So this is the one example. Let us do problem number 13. Let x1, x2, xn be a random sample from normal mu sigma square. So both are unknown. So that x bar is a minimax estimator of mu under the loss function. This. How do you solve, anyone? Can anyone show why this should be, sorry, 13th problem? When mu and sigma square both are unknown, when what we saw is when sigma is known, then this is minimax, right? Because then sigma is constant and under a minus mu whole square, we saw that x bar is minimax. It says, but what we saw is if you only take a squared error loss function, a minus mu whole square, and mu and sigma both are unknown, then x bar is not minimax. Why? Because supremum risk of any estimator is infinity. So in fact, minimaxity doesn't make sense because supremum risk is infinity. So either you can say that all estimators are minimax and their maximum risk could be infinity. But this problem is slightly different. It says that rather than considering a minus mu whole square, if you divide it by sigma square, then x bar remains minimax. And its maximum risk, of course, would be 1 by n, right? You know, because the risk of x bar is sigma square by n, variance of x bar. So a minus mu whole square by sigma square, when you consider its risk would be 1 by n. So supremum risk would be 1 by n. So how do you prove this? Anyone?
You fix a particular sigma square, say sigma square 2e1, and then vary it over the entire family.
Yeah. So first you fix sigma square, and so that for a fixed sigma square, that means for a known sigma square, this is minimax. X bar is minimax. Then we did a result in the class that if some estimator is minimax in a smaller class, and its supremum risk over a smaller class is same as supremum risk over a bigger class, then the estimator is minimax in the bigger class also. I see the x bar is minimax in the smaller class. That means when sigma square is 1. What is its risk? Its risk is 1 upon n. So its supremum risk is 1 by n, whether theta naught or theta whole theta. So that result is applicable. So your x bar becomes minimax if your loss function is this. How do you problem number 14th? In a two sample problem, normal problem, independent random samples with unknown means, find a minimax estimator of mu2 minus mu1 under the square error loss function. When the variances are unknown, possibly unequal, the variance sigma 1 square and sigma 2 square are unknown, but they are bounded, you know. Anyone? So this is for the case when sigma 1 square and sigma 2 square are when variances are known. First case, anyone? How did you do it in the first one sample problem? That will give you a hint. You know that x bar has a constant risk. In the one sample problem, you saw that x bar has a constant risk sigma square by n when sigma square is unknown, right? So if you can find a Bayes estimator whose Bayes risk converges to sigma square by n, because that is a Bayes risk of x bar, then x bar would be minimax, right? That is how you prove it over here. So exactly do it over here, except that now you have two parameters. So you'll have to consider the prior of mu1 and mu2. So you consider prior of mu1 and mu2 as independent normal. The way you consider it in the one sample case, you can consider normal 0m, both you can consider as 0m, 0m. So the prior for mu1, mu2 would be that of an independent normal 0m IID random variables. You can find out the posterior square error loss function. So posterior mean would be the Bayes estimator. So expected value of mu2 minus expected value of mu1, because they are independent. So it would be x bar minus y bar. No, not x bar minus y bar. The way you obtained in the one sample problem, this would be y bar plus, right? Y bar 1 upon n plus that weighted kind of a thing. This would be x bar something this. Consider its risk, and so that goes to sigma 1 square upon m plus sigma 2 square upon n if samples are of equal size, unequal sizes. Right? Exactly the same way. And this also exactly you do the same way. You do it for the smaller one and then do it exactly the way you did it in the one sample problem. I think this problem I did in one of those problem solving sessions. X is Poisson theta 1. Consider estimation of theta under the square error loss function. So that for any estimated delta, supremum delta theta is infinity. So what you do is you know that supremum is always greater than or equal to average, right? So if for any estimator I have to find a supremum, I try to show that supremum is always greater than or equal to average risk of delta, which is same as the base risk of delta. But base risk of delta would be always greater than or equal to base risk of a base estimator, right? So what you do is you choose a suitable prior, which has certain parameters which you can play around with. Find the base estimator, find its base risk, which would be in terms of parameter alpha and beta, and try to choose some parameter alpha and beta so that they go to infinity. Then supremum risk of delta would be greater than or equal to base risk of a base estimator, which is going to infinity. Now this supremum risk does not depend on the prior parameters which you have chosen for the bias estimator. So it is happening for every parameter alpha and beta. So you can take alpha and beta so that everything goes to infinity on right hand side. Since left hand side does not depend on those parameters, you conclude that supremum would be infinity. So what you have to do is consider a proper prior. What is a conjugate prior? So to make things simpler, you can consider conjugate prior. What is a conjugate prior for Poisson? Anyone? We did it in the lectures. What is a conjugate prior for Poisson? Gamma, right? Because e to power minus theta for x by factorial x.
Yes, sir.
You can consider gamma. Gamma
Yes, sir.
parameters alpha and beta, so that you have a liberty of choosing two parameters alpha and beta. You can find out the base estimator, which I did in the lecture notes. Your base estimator, you can find out its base risk, right?
Yes.
This would be in terms of alpha and beta, right? What you say is supremum risk of delta would be greater than or equal to base risk of a base estimator. So supremum delta would be greater than or equal to some function of alpha and beta. Now try to choose alpha. Now this happens for every alpha and beta, because for every alpha and beta there is a prior. Try to choose alpha and beta so that right hand side can go to infinity, or the base risk of a base estimator can go to infinity, and that too. Okay. Now this problem I did in one of those video lectures, right? This also we did. Right. So anything else you want to ask? So essentially we have covered all the problems, unless you have some specific. If you want me to provide a solution of a specific problem, that also I can do. I can post it on the portal the way I did for two problems. So if you want me to provide the solution of any specific problem, I can do that. Yeah. When is the semester ending? Do you have any idea when is the end semester examinations?
Sir, December 3 to 12.
December 3 to
12.
12. But that time you will have those things placement. I can't hear somebody. Yeah.
I think that during that time also the placement interviews are going to be held. The SPO has also sent a mail that the interviews are going to be taken virtually from 1st December only. So I think there might be some changes made to either one of them. It has to be made actually.
I think exam may be postponed by 10 days or a week or so. There is a possibility that exams will be postponed by a week. Both things cannot go simultaneously. Then.
Yes, sir. Yes.
It's for final year students. So there is a possibility that it may get postponed. That's okay. That's not a problem. Ours possibly most likely would be on the first day itself. So yes, anything you want to discuss? Yeah. What is the reason? This is very boring, right? For me as well as don't want to ask anything. So it seems you know everything. Then I can now pinpoint people and then ask questions, right? Can I start asking questions now? Yeah. Let me start with the people who are hiding their face. So Souvik? Yeah, Souvik, can you hear me? Yeah? So you tell me how will you solve the problem number, any problem you tell me and explain. Number 4. Any problem from assignment number 4? Rest of the let me just share the yeah, Souvik. Which problem you want to explain to the rest of the class? Yeah? Souvik, you can't hear me? Souvik, are you hearing me?
I think his video is on, sir. Yeah, he unmuted himself.
Huh?
Yes, sir.
You can hear me, right? So tell me which problem you want to explain to the whole class.
Hmm.
Sir, can I send you solution by writing on page or something?
That way, otherwise it is becoming difficult.
Huh?
Which problem you are saying that you can solution of which problem you want to explain?
No, I'm saying that I will send you solution after.
I was asking it for the benefit of the whole class, not for myself, right? I'm not trying to test you. My thing was if something is happening, you should be active. That's the whole purpose. Purpose was to make you active, not to test you. I don't want to. Okay, then let me just continue because I can't leave lecture like this. You see, the next topic which I am considering is about asymptotically efficient estimators. You see, what you have seen so far is We discussed various techniques to find optimal estimators wherever they exist. And we saw that in certain situations where especially we have a very nice structure, like normal distribution, some very specific distributions, we could find optimal estimators. Many times what may happen is it may not be possible to get optimal estimators because the class of distributions under study may not be clear. So you may not like to assume a normal distribution. Then what happens is, then I cannot talk about their mean square error in a very nice form for various estimators, except for some trivial estimators like sample mean, sample variance, and so on. So that means what we need is, we need estimators which at least perform better if sample size is large. Right? Now, why that should happen? Because you see, if somebody is saying, so you go to a doctor, so a statistician is like a doctor, a practitioner goes to a doctor, he says, give me a prescription for this problem. And statistician gives him a prescription in terms of a Hutchinson estimator to make things simpler so that you can understand. He says, I have to estimate the mean height. He says, looks at the things and he says that use the sample mean. Somebody else may say that use the sample median. Somebody says that no, you use the average of mean and median. Now, a practitioner would like to have some guarantee that why should I buy your product, right? A statistician is selling a product by saying that either use sample mean, sample median, some combination of sample mean and median. Now, the actual model may not be known to you, right? So what at least is expected is that there should be some tests available which one can apply and see whether there is a reasonable estimator or not. So what should happen? The most reasonable test is if my sample size becomes infinite. Now sample size it becomes infinite means that means you have all the data available to you. That means your whole population is available to you. If whole population is available to you, you no longer need a statistics. You have all the information about population. So that means whatever then your estimator is there, whatever statistician is saying, that should correspond with the total population. Right? See, in other words, whatever estimator you are proposing, that should be very close to the true parameter which you are estimating. So that means the error should be minimum. And one such property is called the consistency, right? What is the consistency? You say that as n goes to infinity, your estimator delta n should approach g theta in probability, which is equivalent to saying that as my n becomes large, the probability that the difference between delta n and g theta is bigger than any specified threshold, that probability would go to 0. Of course, one can have a much stronger requirement that delta n should go almost surely to g theta. Right? But consistency is a reasonable criteria. So consistency could be one criteria. So what is expected is that any estimator which I am proposing should be consistent. And of course, as I said, you would expect that errors should go to 0. So what should happen? Expected value of delta n minus g theta whole square, at least in the real line case, this should go to 0, right? Because that is an error, expected error. Now you know that if that happens, then delta n goes in probability to g theta anyway. So these are much stronger condition that error goes to 0. L2 error goes to 0. L2 means that error with respect to L2 distance. L2 distance is equal to delta n minus g theta whole square. So these gives rise to asymptotic considerations. That we should try to see the consistency. We should try to see whether error is going to 0 or not. And then if there are two estimators, how to compare them, because their exact mean square error may not be known, or they may be very difficult to obtain in a closed form. So what you do is you try to compare them in certain asymptotic sense. Asymptotic sense means as n becomes large. So in this chapter, that is what exactly we'll do. There were different estimators. How can we compare these estimators asymptotically? Because in many real life situations, the exact distribution or the underlying distributions may not be known. So finding the expressions for the risk function, variance, bias of these estimators may not be possible. What may be possible is their approximations for large values of n. So you may like to compare them for large values of n, because if n is large, that means you have all the information about population. This would be very close to the true population. That is the minimum requirement one would have. So that means consistency is the minimum requirement which should be there. Anything less than consistency should not be accepted. That means estimator which is not consistent has no value. Why? Because then you are fooling people, right? Because you're saying that use this estimator to estimate something, but then your estimator is such that when you have all the information about population, it is not close to the true thing which you are estimating. So in that sense, consistency is a non-negotiable property. That has to be there, right? As an example, if you are estimating mean theta, then you know that x bar is consistent. But x bar is consistent only says that, okay, this is one of the contenders. There may be more consistent estimators. In fact, you know that if x bar is consistent and if Cn goes to 1, then Cn x bar n is also consistent, because if x bar n goes in probability to theta and Cn goes to 1, then Cn x bar n is also consistent. Right? So all these Cn x bar n's are good contenders to be an estimator. And certainly x bar n plus 1 is not a good contender. Why? Because it is not even consistent, because x bar n plus 1 goes in probability to theta plus 1. So as n becomes large, that means even when you have a whole information available to you, x bar n would be close to theta plus 1. So there would be an error of 1 unit estimating theta. So certainly any estimator x bar plus c for c not equal to 0, you would discard, because they do not satisfy the minimal requirement which I want, that my estimator at least should be consistent, right? That means when I have all the information, my estimator should be same as the exact value of the parameter. Right? Now the issue arises, consistency is a non-negotiable property, so there may be many estimators which are consistent. So for example, as I said, x bar n is consistent for population mean. Then Cn x bar n is also consistent for population means. What is the probability of a consistent? That delta n goes in probability to theta. Now note that if delta n is going in probability to theta, then 1 upon n into delta n minus, let us say delta n goes in probability to g theta. Then 1 upon n into delta n minus g theta also goes in probability to 0. N times delta n minus g theta, I do not know whether it goes to 0 or not, because delta n minus g theta goes to 0, but n goes to infinity. So it looks like for consistent estimators, when I'm comparing consistent estimators like Cn x bar n's, I can compare them with respect to the criteria that which one is going to 0 at a much faster rate. Right? So if you have a two consistent estimators, you try to see, so let us say delta 1n and delta 2n are two sequences of consistent estimators. You know that delta 1n minus g theta also goes to 0, and delta 2n minus g theta also goes to 0. But then I see that which one 0 at a much faster rate. Because the one which is going to 0 at a much faster rate would require lesser sample size to get the same approximation. It will require
Yes, sir.
sample size to be close to the true parameter. Double N with a smaller sample size would become closer to G3. Then that gives a rise to the order of convergence of a consistent estimator. The one which is going at a faster rate. Right?
Hmm.
If delta 1 and minus G theta goes to 0, that is consistent.
Hmm.
And n times delta 1 and minus G theta but goes to 0. But delta 2n, what happens is delta 2n minus G theta goes to 0 as well as n times delta and delta 2n minus G theta also goes to 0. Then certainly delta 2n is better because even if you multiply it by n, the error is going to 0. So its rate is 1 by n. Then in this case, certainly you would prefer delta 2n because even if you multiply by n times delta 2n minus G theta, that also is going to 0. So that gives rise to comparison of consistent estimators in terms of the one which is going to 0 at a faster rate, and which basically leads finally to the concept of asymptotic relative efficiency. And that is what we'll discuss in the next few lectures. So the idea of the next few modules is related to whatever we did. Whatever we did so far was based on an assumption that the world is beautiful, that you're dealing with a very nice structure like normal distribution or the exponential distribution. So that means you can model the real world which you are dealing with. So it is, the world is beautiful in that sense. That means you are able to model it through a very simple, very nice structure like a normal distribution or an exponential distribution. Right? For example, you may say that height of students at IIT Bombay is normally distributed. So you have modeled it and said that it is normal distribution. Of course, modeling itself is a part of statistics. And one has to give justification why such a model is applicable. So goodness of fit test you can apply whether it is a normal or not or whatever. But sometimes that may not be possible. You may not be able to model it through a very nice structure. So in those situations, I need some performance criteria. And of course, performance criteria could be in terms of risk functions, but the problem here is because the structure is not so beautiful. So by risk functions, deriving the expressions from risk functions may not be that easy. Now, if that happens, then what the easiest thing is you try to look at the approximations. And in this case, it may be useful to consider approximations when sample size is large, because then you know that your estimator should be close to the thing which you are estimating. So this next few modules would be dedicated to these large sample properties of estimators. All right. So I think we are just nearing time. Today, it was slightly disappointing in the sense that I did not see much participation from you people. More like a silent spectator, and that's okay once in a while, but let's hope.
Sir, actually, we had many aptitude tests after Wednesday, so did not get time to see lectures that much.
Okay, good. So let's see. When is yours? Wednesday.
After Wednesday, there are many exams, so that's the reason.
Placement
did not get time to see further videos.
So you have these
after Wednesday.
These are part of your placement exercise, or?
Yes, sir. part of placement.
And then you would be shortlisted based on
On this paper.
On the
basis of
score,
this paper.
based on the score in this aptitude.
and what is
So there were actually 3 to 4 aptitudes. So that's why I did not get the time.
how do you do? Do you do some coaching or you look at the online material which is available for preparations?
Yes, sir, online materials
Okay.
and some PDFs.
And some?
PDFs,
What is this PDF?
sir, books, online available
Sir,
books. Where,
some resources that our seniors have shared with us. We study from those also.
yes, sir.
So there are a lot of these puzzles and all that, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So one puzzle you may be interested in is, have you heard of, because statistics students, Simpson's paradox? Have you heard Simpson's?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Yes, here, it's a very interesting read. You would love it. I'll just give you a brief description. And Simpson paradox, there are a lot of examples and you can do it. So there was, I'll start with a story, small story, and then you can understand. So you see, you know the University of Berkeley, right? University of California at Berkeley?
Yes, sir.
Universities. So in 1970s, there was allegation on University of California, Berkeley, that it is biased towards males. So that means females are discriminated against. And that was in terms of number of admissions which it offers. So what happened is, the way it was portrayed was, it said, look, these many males applied to this place, these many females applied to this place, University of California, Berkeley. And then out of these males applied, let us say 60% of the males were accepted, whereas among the females, only 30% of the females were accepted. Based on that, a conclusion or allegation was made that, look, University of California, Berkeley is biased in terms of the gender, as far as admissions are concerned. No, the university was in big dilemma that he says, no, we never do that. And then they hired a statistician from, not a hired a statistician, they had a statistics, one of the best statistics department over there. And then they said, okay, look, please analyze why this is happening. Then what he says is, he says, look, I would like to see the data department wise rather than the whole data. So so 8 or 9 departments he looked into, and what he saw was, out of these 8 departments, in the 6 departments, the trend was otherwise. That means here females were admitted more in terms of percentage. Only in 2 departments, male were, and male also by marginal amounts. So what was happening is, it became a paradoxical, looks like a paradoxical situation. That when you go to the departmental level, the trend is that it is beneficial, the admission is biased towards the females. But when you aggregate it across the university, it gets reversed. Now, this is famously known as the Simpson's paradox. So the things at the local level, that trend may reverse when you just combine the effects. So just try to read this Simpson's paradox, Google it out, and then you can read a lot of examples related with it. And it is one of the famous paradoxes in statistics. Another one was World War II. I think I'll finish. You have another class, right now?
No, sir.
No, sir. We don't have
No,
any
sir.
class.
Yes, I'll take 2 more minutes. So another example is of Simpson's paradox is related to this World War II. So World War II, these Americans were using a lot of these warplanes, and they were suffering a lot of casualties of their warplanes. And then there was a study why it is happening. what should we do? Then the study was that they looked into the war planes and looked at which reasons the attack was more, and then they tried to say that, look, we should try to strengthen these parts of the war planes, and then the matter was also referred to a statistician, a famous statistician, you might have heard his name, W.J. Hall. He finally died in India in a plane accident at IIT Bombay, near Bombay, not IIT Bombay, near Bombay. He said, look, with this data, I cannot conclude anything. Because the war planes which are providing to me are the one which have escaped the casualty. So that means these portions are the one which have escaped the casualty. I would like to see the war planes which have not really been in a position to suffer the casualty. So that means that data is not available at all. Because those are the war planes which are more important, because those could not afford or bear that those sorts or whatever, those attacks on the plane. So this is another example where the Simpson's paradox comes in. So you may like to just read it. It's an interesting read. It's very light read. You can just read it as a small, but understanding it requires a little bit understanding why it is happening. Right? Okay, I think I'll just finish. So we'll meet on Wednesday for our discussion hour. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.